Welcome back. You're still watching World Insight with me, Tian Wei. The Chinese Commerce Ministry announced this week that the new round of trade negotiations between China and the U.S. will be held in Beijing from March the 28th to 29th. After several rounds of negotiations, it's difficult to speculate on the outcome of this round of talks, but the upcoming annual meeting of the China Development Forum in Beijing from March the 23rd to 25th could be a hint. Heads of top 500 companies from around the world, senior officials from different countries, as well as scholars, including many CEOs coming from the U.S., will participate in this forum. Earlier, I talked to Fang Jin, the Deputy Secretary General of China Development Research Foundation, who was busy preparing for the forum. He's looking forward to it as a chance for China and the U.S. to exchange views as well. Dr. Fang, what a pleasure to see you in Beijing. With the upcoming China Development Forum, I'm sure you're having some very busy days these days. But tell me about how will this forum be able to help and support the ongoing process of discussion and negotiation between China and the United States?
Well, the two countries are engaged in very intense negotiations, which are expected to be concluded very soon. We hear very positive messages from both governments. But this forum is not about negotiations per se, but rather it's a platform of dialogue between senior Chinese government officials and national business leaders.
Right.
We believe such a dialogue can be conducive to the improvement of the atmosphere between China and other countries, especially in the business community.
But Dr. Fang, as you may know, even inside the American decision-maker circles, there are different opinions about what approach to take toward China. So do you think those topics will also pop up during this year's forum?
Most of the CEOs who come to our forum, they support closer engagement with China in a constructive manner. Maybe some of them do have complaints about market access, about equal treatment, but they want to engage with China in a constructive manner. After all, very often represent their top 3 markets in the world for most of international businesses. So Chinese market is very important to them, and they have been very successful in the past. Even though they may have some problems with the current regulations or implementation of those regulations, but they still want to engage with China in a very positive, constructive manner.
The updated foreign investment law, which came out right after the 2 sessions this year, is a very important piece of legislation. Many foreign investors are looking very closely. Now, Dr. Fang, help us to understand from your perspective what's new and what might serve investors better in China.
The passing of the new foreign investment law is a very positive development. It can serve at least 3 purposes from my perspective. First, it unified and updated all regulations and laws governing foreign investment from the past. It streamlined the legal process, reduced distortions, so that's good for a foreign investor. And secondly, it created more protection for foreign investment, and also more equitable market access for foreign investment, which is also one of the biggest concerns made by foreign investors in the past. And whenever you have a stronger protection of property rights, you will see investment flourish.
Yes.
And that's, I think, the intent of this new law. Thirdly, many people may not notice, the new law also allowed provisions for national security review of foreign investment. This is common practice actually in many advanced countries. I think by having such a specific provision in the new law, it actually creates more transparent and predictable environment for foreign investors to make decisions.
But I'm sure, Dr. Fang, about the implementation issue and also detailed regulations to follow up in order to accommodate this principled law are likely to be topics very hot debated at the forum to come.
Yes, some people argue that China has very good policies in principle, but sometimes it lacks specifics or the specifics don't match with the principle. The problem stems from twofold. One is lack of capacity, maybe in the administrative side of the government. The other is still that we need to overcome a vested interest. As reform has progressed over the last 40 years, the easy pickings of reform have already been, taken, and it's harder to reach consensus now because there is growing divergence of interests. But I think if there's only one country in the world that can overcome such a challenge, I think it's China, because we have very strong leadership at the top who is determined to take actions, and we have a very centralized administrative system that can carry out those decisions without much discount. So I think actually one of the advantages of our system, that we can overcome vested interests, overcome short-sightedness for the sake of long-term benefit for the whole country.
We'll see how those advantages, in your words, will play out in the latter half of the year. Talking about China, in the 2018 government work report, Chinese Premier Li Keqiang set the GDP growth target for this year at between 6 and 6.5%. He also emphasized the three tough battles: financial risks, poverty alleviation, and environmental pollution. They are China's biggest challenges, and he missed no words about deepening reform and opening up. Although slower economic growth is inevitable in regulating the economy, many say are concerned about China's next step. But as an engine of the growth of the world economy, what China aspires to do? I talked to Dr. Fang also about that. Dr. Fang, all of this is happening with the backdrop of the Chinese economy slowing down. Are you concerned, as a researcher and as the organizer of this annual forum, in which biggest names from the business world are coming, about China's growth potential and the quality of the growth potential?
I do sense actually a change in economic sentiment from one of anxiety and uncertainty from last year to one of cautious optimism and confidence this year.
Explain, please.
The reason is very simple. I think, to the credit of Chinese government, they took notice and they took very decisive actions to dispel such anxiety and uncertainty by introducing drastic reform opening up measures, which restored confidence. You can see the stock market is up recently.
What are the measures that you're talking about here?
Well, opening up measures have been announced in several rounds since last year. And the government has also made it very clear about the protection of property rights and intellectual property rights, and providing equal treatment to enterprises from all ownership structures, whether they're SOE, they're privately owned or foreign. And that has made a lot of people very reassured. That's why the confidence, I think, is restored to some extent. And you talk about the confidence of international investors and foreign businesses. Actually, this year we have a record turnout of both foreign delegates and foreign CEOs. It's actually a 20% increase over the previous record. I think that shows, first of all, the importance of Chinese market to international business, but also it shows in times of uncertainty, people actually want to communicate and exchange views more, to reassure each other, I guess.
And also to feel the pulse of real China.
Yes.
How is China going to be more confident about the quality of growth?
I think the success of China over the past 40 years is basically built upon reform and opening up. As long as we continue that process, everything will take care of itself.
Even if other countries are trying to decouple with the Chinese economy?
First of all, it's very difficult to decouple from China. China is so engaged with the world, culturally, economically, and politically. unlike Soviet Union, in the Cold War, where it had only 1% of world trade. China is totally different, and China is not inward-looking. So despite maybe some hardliners in the West trying to decouple from China, China is not going to do so.
Will China continue to be patient and well-controlled in its approach toward the other parties?
I think the government has handled the trade dispute very well. It's very firm on principles, but flexible on specifics. That has also reduced a lot of uncertainty in China and around the world.
I mean, you've been working here for quite some time. What is your takeaway of these years? How is that reflecting, to the others who are attending the forum, the mindset of the Chinese these days?
I think, China Development Forum was set up in year 2000, right before China was about to join WTO. So it's interesting, if you divide the past 40 years of China's history or China's development into two phases, maybe one pre-WTO, one post-WTO, you can see in the first phase, before China joined WTO, the opening up of China has made a tremendous impact on China itself, on its economic development, on people's psyche, but not the other way around. But post-WTO, I think the influence or the impact went both ways. China is now so important. That's why you see at the beginning of our forum, it was very small in attendance, very low-key, but now we have a record turnout and higher profile participation year after year. I think it's a testament.
And a ticket to the forum is hard to acquire.
Yes, by invitation only.
Now, Dr. Fang, before we go, what do you think will be the goal of this year's forum? Once achieved, that is a success. What?
This year's theme of our forum is actually opening up further for common benefit. So I think if we have a very lively, very candid discussion, if they can learn the latest policy development in China, and at the same time all the foreign delegates can make positive contribution or even suggestions to Chinese development, I think that will be the ultimate measure of our success.
I know you have to run for your work. For now, thank you so much for joining us for this discussion. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Dr. Fang Jin talking about the upcoming China Development Forum in Diaoyutai in Beijing. And that is all the time we have for today. If you'd like to see more, try to find us World Inside CGTN into your search engine or check out our YouTube channel. Also follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Sina Weibo. From me, Tian Wei, and everyone on the World Inside team, thanks for watching. Tune in again next time for more insights across China and around the world. The weekend is up. Have a good one, everyone. Good night.